The wind on Vega 7 had teeth. Lieutenant Kai Thorne pulled his thermal gear tighter as he watched the atmospheric readings spike across his tablet. The storm brewing on the horizon wasn't just weather, it was a planetary tantrum that could flatten their entire research outpost in minutes. Power couplings on sectors 3 and 7 are showing stress fractures. He called out to the assembled team, his breath forming crystalline clouds in the bitter air. I can reinforce them, but we need at least 2 hours before we don't have to hours. The voice cut through the howling wind like a blade. Commander Vexara emerged from the swirling snow, her pale blue skin somehow untouched by the cold that had the human crew shivering despite their gear. Her red curls whipped around her angular face, and those amber eyes strange and beautiful fixed on the incoming storm, with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. For 6 weeks, Kai had worked alongside the Karathari warrior. 6 weeks of professional exchanges, respectful nods, and the kind of careful distance that existed between species who were still learning to trust each other. The Karathari were desert-born, their proud civilization carved from sand and sun. Yet here was their finest commander stationed on a frozen hellscape, leading joint operations with humans she barely knew. She never complained, never showed weakness. The cold that sent humans scrambling for heat packs seemed to slide off her like water. 15 minutes until the front hits, Vexara continued, her voice carrying that melodic accent that made everything sound like a war song. All non-essential personnel to the main bunker. Engineering crews secure what you can and follow. The next quarter hour blurred into controlled chaos. Kai's hands flew over conduits and power relays, racing against meteorological fury while the sky turned the color of old bruises. Around him, tents began to buckle and snap, their polymer frames no match for winds that could strip paint from hull plating. His own shelter a standard issue human emergency pod folded like paper. Damn, he stood in the wreckage, sleeping. Gear scattered across the ice, tablet clutched against his chest. The main bunker was a 50-meter sprint through what was rapidly becoming a whiteout. Doable, but not pleasant, Lieutenant. He spun. Vexara stood beside her own shelter, a sleek, curved structure that seemed to flex with the wind rather than fight it. Karathari engineering. Designed for sandstorms, but apparently equally suited for ice storms. She regarded him with those unreadable amber eyes, snow gathering in her crimson hair. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The storm raged around them, but something in the air felt suddenly still, charged. You will sleep in my tent tonight. The words hit him harder than the wind. Not a question, not quite an order. Something else entirely, something that made his pulse quicken for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. Among humans, it might mean simple shelter, practical protection from the elements. But Vexara wasn't human. He started to protest, to explain he could make it to the bunker. But she was already turning toward her shelter's entrance. The way she moved, fluid and certain, suggested this wasn't up for debate. The storm will last until dawn, she said without looking back. You'll freeze before you reach the bunker. Kai glanced toward the main building, barely visible through the swirling snow, then back at the Karathari commander who had just offered him sanctuary. 6 weeks of careful professionalism, and now this. Whatever this was. Thunder rolled across the frozen landscape, not weather, but the sound of the universe shifting around them. He followed her inside. The interior of Vexara's shelter was a revelation, where human gear was utilitarian and cramped. Her space flowed with elegant efficiency. Soft lighting emanated from crystalline panels, casting everything in warm amber hues. Personal items, a ceremonial blade, carved figurines that might have been religious icons. Data tablets covered in flowing Karathari script spoke of a life beyond their shared mission. It smelled like her, something exotic and warm, like spices, from a world he'd never seen. Remove your outer gear, she said, her back to him as she sealed the entrance. It will only trap moisture. Kai hesitated, suddenly aware that accepting her offer meant more than just shelter from the storm. It meant crossing a line that 6 weeks of careful military protocol had kept firmly in place outside. The wind screamed like something alive and angry. Inside, Commander Vexara turned to face him, and for the first time since he'd known her, Her expression held something other than professional detachment. Everything was about to change. Between them. Kai's thermal jacket hit the floor with a soft thud, followed by his boots and outer pants. The shelter's warmth embraced him immediately, a stark contrast to the howling chaos outside. He stood in his base layers, acutely aware of how intimate. This felt alone with Vexara in her private space while the storm raged around them. She moved with practiced efficiency, checking seals and adjusting environmental controls. Her armor form-fitting plates that seemed to flow with her movements caught the amber light like scales. Everything about her spoke of deadly grace, yet here in her sanctuary, she seemed almost domestic. Sit. She gestured toward cushions ranged around a glowing heat core. The storm will worsen before it passes. Kai lowered himself onto the surprisingly comfortable seating, watching as she began removing pieces of her armor. Each piece revealed more of her pale blue skin, the intricate tattoos that spiraled along her arms in patterns that seemed to shift in the changing light. Commander, I should clarify, I don't want you to think I expect anything, Vexara. She paused in removing her shoulder guard, amber eyes meeting his. In this space, I am Vexara, not your commander. The correction sent heat through his chest. Vexara, he repeated, tasting her name. I just meant, I know what you meant. She set the armor piece aside with deliberate care. Among humans, sharing shelter is practical. Among Karithari, she paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. We do not invite others into our shelter unless we are prepared to protect them completely, or bond with them. Kai's breath caught. Bond, in our culture, one's tent is sacred, private. To invite another inside is to say I trust you with my life, my secrets, my soul. She removed her gauntlets, revealing elegant hands with long fingers. It is not done lightly. The heat core pulsed between them, casting dancing shadows on the shelter walls outside. Something crashed, probably another human shelter, succumbing to the wind. Inside, the silence stretched taut with unspoken meaning. Then why? Kai asked quietly. Why invite me? Vexara paused in removing her chest piece, her gaze intense. Because in 6 weeks, you have never once questioned my competence, because I am not human. You repair our equipment as carefully as your own. You listen when I speak of tactics, even when your own people dismiss Karithari methods. She set the armor aside, now wearing only a form-fitting underlayer that revealed the lithe strength of her frame. You see me as a warrior first, an alien second. You are a warrior, Kai said, his voice rougher than intended. The best I've ever worked with. Something shifted in her expression, surprise, perhaps, or pleasure. She settled onto the cushions, across from him, close enough that he could see the fine patterns in her skin, the way her red curls caught the light like flame. My people are proud, she continued. We do not show weakness, but this cold. She rubbed her arms, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked vulnerable. It seeps into our bones. My home world has 3 suns. Here, I feel like I'm slowly freezing from the inside out. Without thinking, Kai reached out, his hand covering hers. Her skin was cooler than human normal, but soft with a texture like silk. Why didn't you say anything? We could have adjusted your quarters, modified the heating systems, because Karithari do not ask for help. But she didn't pull her hand away. We endure. We adapt. We survive. You don't have to just survive. His thumb traced across her knuckles. Not with me. Her breath caught, a sound so soft he almost missed it over the storm. When she looked up, her amber eyes held something he'd never seen before: uncertainty, hope, desire. On my world, she said quietly, when someone shares your shelter, you share everything. Warmth, stories, truth. Her free hand reached up, fingertips brushing his cheek. I have watched you for weeks, Kai Thorn, the way you work, the way you treat others, the way you face danger without flinching. I have wanted. What have you wanted? The question came out as barely a whisper. Instead of answering with words, she leaned forward, closing the space between them. Her lips met his soft, tentative, tasting of something exotic and sweet. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, 2 different species learning each other's rhythms. Then Kai's hand found the back of her neck, threading through those magnificent red curls. and she made a sound low in her throat that sent fire through his veins. Her mouth opened under his, and suddenly there was nothing tentative about it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. "Among my people," she whispered. "A kiss in one's shelter is a promise." "What kind of promise?" "That you will protect what is mine." Her hand pressed against his chest, over his racing heart. "And that I will protect what is yours." Outside, the storm continued its assault on the outpost. Inside, Kai felt the last of his carefully maintained professional distance crumble away. Vexar, not commander, not alien, but the woman who had trusted him with her most sacred space, looked at him with eyes that held starlight and possibility. "I've never made a promise to an alien before," he said, his hands still tangled in her hair. A smile curved her lips, the first real smile he'd ever seen from her. "I've never made one to a human. Then we'll figure it out together, this time." When she kissed him, it felt like coming home to a place he'd never been, but had always been searching for. The night deepened around them as the storm raged with increasing fury. Kai and Vexara had shifted closer on the cushions, their bodies seeking warmth and connection as they talked in hushed tones. The heat core between them pulsed steadily, but it was the heat building between them that made the cold outside seem irrelevant. "Tell me about your home," Kai said, his fingers tracing the intricate tattoos that spiraled up her arm. Each touch sent shivers through her that had nothing to do with the cold. Crether Prime. Her voice took on a dreamy quality, endless dunes of silver sand, cities carved into canyon walls, and the Trisun dawn when all three suns rise together and paint the sky in colors your language has no words for. She tilted her head, red curls cascading over her shoulder. "The warmth there penetrates everything. Even the stones hold heat through the night. It sounds beautiful." His hand had found its way to her waist, spanning the curve of her hip through the thin fabric. "What about Earth, your home?" Kai's expression grew distant. "Urban sprawl and recycled air, mostly. I grew up in New Geneva, all towers and sky bridges. Never saw a natural sunrise until I joined the cores." He looked at her, amber eyes reflecting the heat core's glow. "But there are places, mountains where the air is so clean it hurts to breathe. Oceans that stretch to the horizon. Earth has one sun, but it can be just as breathtaking. I would like to see it someday." The admission was soft, vulnerable. "I'd like to show you." He cupped her face, thumb tracing the elegant line of her cheekbone. All of it. The storm outside intensified, shaking the shelter's flexible frame. Instinctively, they moved closer together, and suddenly Kai was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, her thigh against his, her hand resting on his chest, the way her breath caught when he looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing in the universe. "In Karithari bonding ceremonies," she said quietly, "partners share the heat of three suns. They speak their truths under starlight and seal their bond with the desert wind as witness." Her fingers played with the fabric of his shirt. "But we are far from desert winds. Then we make our own ceremony." Kai's voice was rough with emotion and desire. "Our own promises." She looked up at him, those incredible amber eyes searching his face. "What would you promise me, Kaithorn?" "That I see you not just the warrior, not just the alien, but Vexara, the woman who's too proud to admit she's cold, who cares for her equipment like it's alive, who watches the stars through the observation deck when she thinks no one is looking." His hand tangled in her hair. "That I'll protect what matters to you, even if it means standing against my own people." Her breath hitched. "And what would you have me promise?" "That you won't shut me out when things get complicated. That you'll trust me with your truths, your fears, your dreams." He leaned closer, lips brushing her temple. "That you'll let me warm you when the cold becomes too much." "I promise," she whispered, and then she was kissing him with a desperation that spoke of longing held in check too long. This kiss was different, deeper, hungrier. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and he responded by gathering her against him until there was no space between them. When she shifted to straddle his lap, the soft sound she made against his mouth sent electricity down his spine. "Vexara." He breathed against her neck, tasting skin that was cool silk and fire combined. "I know." Her hands found the hem of his shirt, fingers exploring the muscles of his chest. learning the differences between human and Karathari anatomy. Among my people, to touch skin to skin in one's shelter is sacred. It binds souls as well as bodies. Are you sure? Even as desire clouded his thoughts, he needed her consent, her certainty. Instead of answering with words, she pulled back and slowly, deliberately, removed her underlayer. The sight of her pale blue skin decorated with intricate tattoos, curves that were both alien and utterly feminine, made his mouth go dry. "Now you," she said. Hands returning to his shirt, the fabric hit the floor, joining hers in a pile of discarded barriers. When skin met skin, they both gasped at the sensation, the contrast of temperatures, the electric charge that seemed to arc between them. "You're beautiful," Kai whispered, hands mapping the landscape of her body with reverent touches. "As are you." Her lips found his throat, tongue tasting salt and desire. "I have dreamed of this, of you." They moved together with increasing urgency, hands and mouths exploring, learning, claiming. When she arched beneath him, red hair spread across the cushions like flame, her amber eyes bright with passion and trust, Kai felt something fundamental shift inside him. This wasn't just physical desire, this was connection at its most primal, level to beings from different worlds finding perfect synchronization, despite every difference between them. "Stay with me," she whispered as they moved together, finding a rhythm that transcended species and culture. "Always," he promised, sealing the vow with his lips against hers. Later, as they lay entwined in the afterglow, the heat core painting, their skin in golden light, Vexara traced patterns on his chest with lazy fingers. "The storm is passing," she observed, though the wind still rattled the shelter. "Yeah." Kai's arms tightened around her. "Dawn won't be long. When the sun rises, we return to duty, to protocols and procedures." Her voice held a note of uncertainty he'd never heard before. "When the sun rises," he corrected, pressing a kiss to the crown of her head. "We face whatever comes together. The rest we'll figure out as we go." She lifted her head to look at him, those amber eyes serious. "This changes everything between us." "Yes," he agreed simply. "It does." Outside, the first hint of morning light began to filter through the storm clouds. Inside their shelter, their sanctuary, two souls from different worlds held each other close, knowing that whatever challenges dawn brought, they would face them as one. Dawn came too quickly and brought reality with it. Kai emerged from Vexara's shelter into the crisp morning air, the storm having passed during the night. Round the outpost, personnel were already assessing damage and beginning repairs. He tried to act casual, but the knowing looks from his human colleagues made it clear that his night's accommodations hadn't gone unnoticed. "Cozy night, Thorn." Lieutenant Beck's smirk was all too knowing as he approached. "Storm get a little too rough for you. Just took shelter where it was offered." Kai replied evenly, though heat crept up his neck. "I'll bet." Beck's eyes flicked toward Vexara's intact shelter, then back to Kai with obvious speculation. "Funny how alien shelters held up better than ours. Makes you wonder what else they do better." Before Kai could respond, Beck had moved on, but the damage was done. By midday, whispers followed him through the outpost, sideways glances, half-heard conversations that stopped when he approached, and the kind of speculation that could destroy careers. Vexara maintained perfect professional composure, her mask of command firmly in place as she coordinated post-storm operations, but Kai caught the tension in her shoulders, the way her amber eyes avoided his when they briefed the recovery teams together. The breaking point came 3 days later. "Lieutenant Thorne, report to my office immediately." Colonel Morrison's voice over the comm carried the kind of authority that brooked no delay. Kai found himself standing at attention before Morrison's desk, the older man's expression unreadable behind steel-gray eyes. "There are rumors circulating about you and the Karathari commander," Morrison said without preamble. "Care to explain?" "Sir, I took shelter during the storm. Nothing more occurred than, son, I've been in this business for 30 years. I know the difference between taking shelter and taking liberties." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "The question is, how far did those liberties go?" Kai's jaw tightened. "With respect, sir, my personal life ceased being personal the moment it involved an alien dignitary. Morrison's voice cut like a blade. Do you have any idea what you've potentially compromised? The Karathari are evaluating whether to expand our alliance. One whiff of impropriety, and they could withdraw completely. Commander Vexara is a professional. Her judgment is being questioned by her own people. Morrison slid a data pad across the desk. High Command received this transmission. This morning, Kai read the brief message, his blood chilling with each word. Vexara was being recalled to Krether Prime for consultation regarding her conduct and commitment to mission parameters. This is my fault, Kai said quietly. Yes, it is. The question now is what we do about it. Morrison stood, moving to the window overlooking the outpost. I could transfer you immediately. Send you to a research station in the outer rim where your career can quietly stagnate. Sir, or, Morrison continued, I could accept that what happened between you two was natural, human or in her case. Karathari and figure out how to minimize the political fallout. Kai blinked, surprised. Sir, Morrison turned back, his expression softer than Kai had ever seen it. My wife is Centauri, Lieutenant. Met her 20 years ago during the border conflicts. I know what it's like to love someone the universe tells you is wrong for you. He sat back down. The difference is, we kept it quiet until the politics caught up with the reality. What are you saying? I'm saying if this is real, if what you to have is worth fighting for, then you'd better be prepared to fight. Her people won't make it easy, neither will ours. That evening, Kai found Vexara in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. She didn't turn when he approached, but her reflection in the transparistel showed eyes bright with unshed tears. When do you leave? He asked quietly. Tomorrow morning. The transport arrives at 0800. Her voice was carefully controlled, but he heard the pain beneath it. This is temporary. You'll be back. No. She finally turned to face him, and the anguish in her expression hit him like a physical blow. They're recalling me permanently. My career, my reputation, everything I've worked for is gone because she trailed off, hands clenching into fists. Because you what? Because you trusted me? Because you let yourself feel something. Kai stepped closer, wanting to touch her but uncertain if she'd welcome it. Because I was weak. The word came out like a curse. Karathari do not compromise missions for personal desires. We do not allow emotion to cloud judgment, and we certainly do not. She gestured helplessly between them. Love, Kai supplied quietly. She flinched as if he'd struck her. That word means nothing to my people when applied to outsiders, to aliens, but it means something to you. He moved closer still, close enough to see the internal war playing out in her amber eyes, doesn't it? What I feel is irrelevant, but her voice broke on the words, like hell it is. Kai reached for her hands, relief flooding through him when she didn't pull away. You think I don't know what this is costing you? You think I can't see how much it hurts to choose between duty and I'm not choosing. Her grip on his hands tightened painfully. That's the problem. I should choose duty. I should go back to Krether Prime, accept whatever punishment they deem appropriate, and never think of you again. But I dream of your touch. I wake each morning hoping to see your smile. I find myself making excuses to work near you, just to hear your voice. Her confession came out in a rush, as if speaking it quickly would lessen its impact. I am compromised beyond redemption. Kai brought her hands to his lips, pressing gentle kisses to her knuckles. Then we find another way. There's no other way. My people will never accept this. Your people will never trust me again. She pulled her hands free, wrapping her arms around herself. Perhaps it's better if I leave. If we pretend these days never happened. Could you do that? Kai asked. Really? Pretend you don't feel anything for me. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they couldn't say. Finally, she whispered, No, I couldn't. Then we don't pretend. He stepped closer, framing her face with his hands. We fight for this. For us. How? How do we fight to civilizations? I don't know yet. But I'm not losing you without a fight. He pressed his forehead against hers. I love you, Vexara. And I know you love me too. Tears finally spilled over, tracking silver paths down her blue cheeks. Love will not be enough. Maybe not. But it's a start. Outside, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, indifferent to the hearts breaking beneath them. Inside, two lovers held each other close, knowing that tomorrow would bring separation, but clinging to hope that somehow love might indeed be enough. The transport was still 6 hours away when the explosion rocked the outpost. Kai was in the main engineering bay, trying to lose himself in routine maintenance work, when the lights flickered and alarms began shrieking. Through the observation windows, he could see smoke rising from the primary power station. "All hands, emergency stations," Morrison's voice crackled over the comm. "We have a cascade failure in the main reactor. Evacuation protocols are in effect." But Kai was already running, not toward the evacuation points, but toward the source of the crisis. His engineer's mind processed the situation automatically. If the reactor went critical, it wouldn't matter where they ran. The explosion would take out half the continent. He found Vexara in the reactor chamber, still in her departure gear but elbow deep in a control panel, her face grim with concentration. What are you doing here?" he shouted over the warning klaxons. "You should be getting to the transport. The containment field is failing." She replied without looking up, her hands flying over Karithari controls that had been integrated into the human systems. "If someone doesn't stabilize it in the next 10 minutes, there won't be a transport to catch." Kai rushed to the human control station, his fingers dancing across familiar interfaces. "Coolant flow is down 60%. I can reroute from the backup systems, but I need someone to manually reset the containment field generators." "That's a 2-person job," Vexara said, finally looking at him. "And it requires someone to be in the chamber when the field resets. The radiation exposure will be lethal, yes." Kai met her eyes. "I'll do it." "No." She stepped away from her controls. "I'll go. My people are better adapted to, hell." Kai was already moving toward the chamber access. "I'm not losing you to save a station. There'll be other stations, and there will be other humans." She grabbed his arm, her grip strong enough to stop him in his tracks. "But there is only one you." The reactor's whine was climbing to a dangerous pitch. They had maybe 5 minutes before the point of no return. "Together," Kai said suddenly. "We do it together. To people, half the exposure time each. We might both survive." Vexara's eyes widened, then filled with something that looked like pride. Together, they worked in perfect synchronization, their weeks of professional partnership melding with the deeper connection they'd forged. Kai's hands flew over the manual controls while Vexara monitored the containment field, calling out readings and adjustments. The radiation levels climbed steadily, but they held their positions. "Field is stabilizing," she reported, her voice steady despite the deadly energy washing over them. 30 more seconds. "Coolant flow restored," Kai confirmed. "Backup systems are online." When the all-clear finally sounded, they stumbled out of the chamber together, both of them showing the early signs of radiation exposure but alive. Emergency medical teams rushed to treat them, but Kai only had eyes for Vexara. "We did it," he said, reaching for her hand. "Yes," she agreed, squeezing his fingers. "We did." What happened next changed everything. Colonel Morrison arrived with the medical teams, took one look at the reactor readings, and turned to the assembled crowd of outpost personnel. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying over the chaos. "What you just witnessed was to officers human and Karithari risking their lives together to save everyone on this station. If that's not the kind of cooperation our alliance needs, I don't know what is." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. But more importantly, Lieutenant Beck stepped forward, his earlier smugness replaced by genuine respect. "I owe you both an apology," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "and I think I speak for all of us when I say thank you." The transport from Krether Prime arrived 3 hours later, but it didn't leave with Vexara. Instead, it brought High Commander Tulf Th, Vexara's superior, who spent an hour in private conference with Morrison. When they emerged, both leaders looked satisfied. It seems, Morrison announced at the evening briefing, that the Karithari High Command has received several reports about the exemplary cooperation between our species here on Vega 7. They're particularly interested in the command team of Lieutenant Thorne and Commander Vexara. Kai felt his heart stop. "Sir, you're both being reassigned. Joint command position on the new Deep Space Research Station. Apparently, They want to use your partnership as a model for future cooperative ventures. Vexara's hand found his under the table, their fingers intertwining. Sir, are you saying? I'm saying the universe just decided to reward you both for nearly dying to save it. Morrison's stern expression cracked slightly. Congratulations. You're about to become the poster couple for interspecies cooperation. 6 months later, Kai stood in their shared quarters aboard Deep Space Station Harmony, watching Vexara prepare for sleep. She'd adapted their quarters to include both human and Karithari comforts, a heat source that reminded her of home, soft lighting that didn't strain human eyes, and most importantly, space designed for 2 different species to share. The new rivals seemed impressed with the tour today, she said, removing her day uniform to reveal the simple sleeping clothes she'd adopted from human customs. The Centauri delegation, Kai nodded, pulling back the covers of their shared beta compromise between human and Karithari sleeping preferences. I think they were more impressed with us than the station. We do make quite the advertisement for interspecies cooperation. She settled beside him, her blue skin lovely. In the soft lighting, 3 different species working together successfully. Is that what we're doing? Kai asked, pulling her close. Working together? She laughed, the sound warm and free in a way that still made his heart race. Among other things, outside their viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and somewhere among them were the worlds they'd each left behind to build something new together. On her nightstand sat a small carved figure from Crether Prime, a gift from her family, who had finally accepted her choice. On his sat a photo from Earth, showing his parents meeting Vexara during their last visit. Kai, she said quietly, settling against his chest, in the position they'd discovered was comfortable for both their anatomies. Do you remember what I said that first night about sleeping in my tent? He smiled, pressing a kiss to her red curls. Among the Karithari, sharing shelter means you're prepared to protect or bond with someone. We've done both. Yes, we have. She lifted her head to look at him, amber eyes bright with contentment. Sleep in my tent tonight, every night, he promised, sealing the vow with a kiss that tasted of forever. Outside, the universe continued its eternal dance, but inside their shared quarters, their tent, their shelter, their home to hearts beat in perfect synchronization. Proof that love could indeed bridge any distance between worlds.